Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 22nd of July of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. First we're going to start with the south, with the Black Sea, with the Crimea and so on. Today the sources published the picture of the ships that were blocked and that currently were trying to get idea support, but none of them have crossed the red line. This is the big Russian red line, and as you can see there is a very big problem, and that there are no ships, not even a ship, are heading in direction of idea support. Basically most of the ships are heading or were transferred to the Ismail port, that it also is a part of Ukrainian territory. For now the Russians yet haven't found any solution how to prevent even these movements, and I believe that the Russians are working on decision or solution to this situation. The Ukrainians continue bombing and shelling Crimea. If you remember yesterday we discussed that as a result of missile attack using storm shadows, the Ukrainians managed to destroy warehouses on the eastern part of Crimea. This morning the Ukrainians made another missile attack. They were using storm shadow for these purposes. As you can see, a very heavy explosion, and the local authorities reported and announced about evacuation zone in 5 kilometers. So that means that there were a lot of very big ammo depot, Russian ammo depot. And to prevent casualties among civilians, the Russians took a decision to evacuate this. So basically, for the previous 2 days, the Russians have lost 2 biggest ammo depots on Crimea. This is a very big problem because we expect that Ukrainians sooner or later will restart their offensive operation. Furthermore, the Blinken, the Secretary, United States Secretary Blinken reported that Ukrainians haven't used their main forces, and currently they're stretching and making some kind of exercises and some trainings before the real offensive operation. And the losing of 2 biggest ammo depots on Crimea is not a very good sign for the Russians. The Russians continue their tradings with the world using their own ports, and for the Ukrainians for now haven't implemented their threatenings that they will attack or destroy any Russian ship. Of course, for now the Ukrainians don't have possibilities to do this, and I believe that the Ukrainians are not going to do this. They're not going to attack the Russian fleet or the ships that are heading in direction of Rostov-on-Don, because the world won't understand this action from the Ukrainian side. But I believe that Ukrainians are trying to prepare some plan, because as we understand, the biggest problem of this sea trading is not the ships, is not the grain, is not reputation. The biggest problem is insurance. Of course, if the Ukrainians are able somehow to destroy a single ship, the payments for insurance are going to be increased highly, and of course nobody will be able to sign a contracts with insurance companies, and this will reduce the level of trading in the Black Sea till 0. So I believe that Ukrainians will try to attack the ships, maybe not like openly. They will try to hide this operation, as we saw operation with the Nord Stream. They will try to implement something like this. Now let's move to the ground, and let's start from Kherson area. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of artillery duels in this bridgehead, the Ukrainians lost 30 soldiers, 4 armored vehicles and 2 artillery systems. The Russians published just one video how they discovered and destroyed the radar that located in the central part of Kherson. The Ukrainians from their side published the video how they were tracking and they managed to discover the Russian infantry troopers that were moving on the Russian side of Dnipro River, and as a result of drone attack, probably those soldiers were wounded. First they were trying to shut down the drone with the rifles, but as I understand they wasn't successful, and the drone managed to attack them. Also, the Ukrainians published the video how they attacked with the drone another group of Russian forces in the vicinity of Kakhovka Dam. The Russians were trying to hide in the trenches, in the fortifications, and the Ukrainians just attacked them using just a regular drone. As you can see, the level of usage of drones is very heavy from the Ukrainian side, and sometimes I have a feeling and opinion that Ukrainians have a bigger drone army in comparison with the Russians. Of course, I'm not talking about Lancet, I'm just talking about FVP drones, because we got more video geolocated confirmations from the Ukrainian side in comparison with the Russians. And as you can see, the Russians took a decision. So it was a very important point in the way of technology development. either the Russians and the Ukrainians at some point faced a very difficult option solution. What to choose? To choose the type of drones that you can use to attack infantry, or to develop and invest your time and money in the drones that can attack the armored vehicles, tanks, fortifications. As we can see, according to the situation on the ground, the Ukrainians, because of lack of investments, lack of time, lack of possibilities, took a decision to invest their time, technologies, their money, everything, their attention to the drones that they can use to attack infantry. And the Russians took a decision to use and to develop the drones in the way of attacking armored vehicles. So that's why we see that both sides have drones, but we see completely different usage of drones by the Ukrainians and by the Russians. The Ukrainians are trying to attack mainly the manpower, and the Russians are trying to attack artillery systems, armored vehicles. Of course, time will tell us who made the right decision and who was wrong, but to tell the truth, currently I see that the Russians took a decision to also to invest some money and some time in developing the drones that they can use to attack manpower, because since recent time we start receiving more and more updates of the usage of drones by the Russians against the Ukrainian infantry. But anyway, the Russians used the drones against Ukrainian infantry less in comparison with the Ukrainians' usage against the Russian infantry. As I understand, maybe the Russians took a decision to correct their plans in this sphere, and this is a very interesting thing to talk about and to discuss. Now we are moving to Zaporozhye area. Today we got a very interesting update from this bridgehead. The Russians reported that they sent journalists, some press, to the territory of Lapkovo, Жеребянки, and the Russians journalists were trying to make a video about the usage of cluster shells, about all the situation. There was a real group of journalists, and the Ukrainians discovered that situation, and they bombed the positions of those journalists with cluster shells. So the journalists were planning to make a video about cluster shells, and the Ukrainians gave them this opportunity. As a result of that attack, the entire Russian group of journalists were wounded, and one of them died as a result of very heavy wounds. So as you can see, the situation is terrible. The Ukrainians intensified the usage of cluster shells, and we see that they're coming in taste of usage these shells, and this is a very dangerous situation, because yet the Russians haven't started using massively their cluster shells. I explained the situation for myself just with one reason. First of all, in a month, the Russians will find the solution how to adopt to cluster munitions, and the Russians are going to get more experience in fighting with the cluster shells, against the cluster rounds, and the Ukrainians are not. So the Russians are trying to save this type of weapon for a very certain and a very important case. Let's say at some point of time the Russians will take a decision to start attacking in the direction of Avdiivka. And of course, in this situation they will use the cluster rounds, because they understand and know for sure that Ukrainian forces who are redeployed and located in the vicinity of Avdiivka are not ready for the usage of this type of weapon against them. So this is the reason. But anyway, the Russians don't have much time. I believe that in a month, even before the second half of August, the Russians will start using the cluster shells, and the first massive usage of this type of weapon we're going to see exactly at the area where the Russians will try to penetrate the Ukrainian defense order and to develop significant offensive operation inside and very deep in direction of Ukrainian territory. Now we are moving to Bradley Square. In the morning video, we discussed about 2 attempts from the Ukrainian side to attack the Russian positions, and later at noontime we got the first videos and first geolocated videos of the results of those attacks. The Russians reported that Ukrainians at 5 a.m. launched attack using 2 tanks and 3 Bradleys and 70 soldiers of infantry. The Russians managed to discover, to track them, and to destroy them using just FEP drones and anti-tank weapon. As a result of that attack, the Ukrainians were completely defeated. At 6:30, 40 minutes later, the Ukrainians sent some kind of reinforcement reserves, probably to evacuate wounded soldiers, but those armored vehicles were destroyed as well. And we have another picture of destroyed Ukrainian convoy that Ukrainians were trying to use to attack Russian positions. As you can see, the picture is not very pleasant. Now we are moving to the Vremevka tactical bridgehead. A few days we haven't received any updates from the Russian side regarding the usage of Ka-52, and today the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation published us another portion of video of usage of Ka-52 and their missiles. On this video we see how the Ukrainians lost another portion of their armored vehicles. Helicopters did their job well, and they destroyed a lot of armored vehicles of the Ukrainians that the Ukrainians were planning to use to restart and to relaunch counter-offensive operation in direction of Staromayorsk. Maybe the Russians during the previous days redeployed Ka-52 to Klishchevka bridgehead. If you remember, we discussed that situation a few days ago, and after the Ka-52 helped the Russian forces there, the Ministry of Defense, the Russian commanders took a decision to move them back and to keep them here, because I understand the Russians expect the renewals of attacks in this area. Furthermore, the Ukrainians made few attempts to attack Russian positions in direction of Staromayorsk along this road, and we discussed this video in the morning. The Ukrainians were using light vehicles with infantry on board, and most of them were destroyed, just got on minefields. For now, the Ukrainians were forced to step back to the north, and currently the Ukrainians are keeping their positions between Rovnopol and Makarovka. And today we got more confirmations from many military experts that the Russians launched counter-offensive operation to the north of Peryutina, and the Russians restored their positions along the river in this area, and the Russians trying to improve their defense belt before the next upcoming Ukrainian offensive operation. This is not like a real Russian counter-offensive operation. This is another operation to maintain the gray zone between Novodarovka, Rovnopol and the Russian positions in Peryutina. Just a regular military situation, military operation before upcoming offensive operation from the enemy. Also, the Russians reported that they destroyed using Lancet, a Ukrainian armored vehicle. As you can see, when talking about the Russians, we were receiving a lot of updates about the usage of Lancet. It's a very perfect weapon, I believe. So the Russians have possibility to send Lancet deep inside the territory of Ukraine, and as a result of that attack, another artillery system was destroyed. And the Ukrainians also published the video how they tracked and destroyed the Russian ammo depot and the Russian artillery system behind Staromlynovka that the Russians were using to supply and support their forces in Urozhain, Peryutin and Staromayorsk against the Ukrainian offensive operation. On this video we see the destroying of Ukrainian howitzer and Ukrainian ammo depot of that howitzer. The Ministry of Defense reported that as a result of fierce fightings from Petykhatki, Bradley Square, Vremevka tactical bridgehead and Ugledar, the Ukrainians lost 190 soldiers, 10 armored vehicles, including 2 tanks and 3 artillery systems. The Russians managed to repel 3 attacks in this area. Now we are moving to Donetsk. The parties, either the Russians and the Ukrainians, took a small operational pause in the vicinity of Avdiivka, Krasnogorovka, and Marinka. We haven't received any updates from this bridgehead from both sides, neither from the Russians nor from the Ukrainians. After, I believe, the fierce fightings in Krasnogorovka and Avdiivka, either the Russians and the Ukrainians got losses. We can't tell about the level of losses, but I believe there were losses, and now the parties are trying to regroup, and probably they're preparing themselves before the next wave of offensive and clashes on this bridgehead. Now we are moving to Bakhmut, Artyomovsk, Klishchevka. Today we got probably the first video, maybe even for this year, of some activities in the vicinity of New York. The Russians published the video how they managed to track the Ukrainian infantry that was moving among the fields, and they managed to discover the Ukrainian stronghold, their checkpoint, and as a result of artillery strike, they destroyed the checkpoint with the Ukrainians inside. So this is the first video from this region, probably for many months. And now we're moving to Klishchevka, to this area. There are very fierce fightings. As I understand, the Ukrainians managed to redeploy their Lancet forces. They're bombing Ukrainians heavily. We got a lot of video confirmations, very fresh, that the Russians destroyed a lot of ammo depots, a lot of artillery systems. For example, on this video we see the destroy of another artillery system that Ukrainians were using to support their offensive forces in direction of Klishchevka. We had the video confirmation of destroyed Ukrainian engineering weapon that Ukrainians were using for building fortifications or probably for building bridges, that the Ukrainians were using for their offensive operation And we got another video from special unit Akhmat Chechensky forces. They made a video that how they were attacking and hunting the Ukrainians during the night. As you can see, they have a very expensive equipment. They have possibilities to hunt and to attack the Ukrainians during the night. They see their signs of their bodies, and of course it gives them lots of benefits in this battle, because they can attack and fight with the Ukrainians not just during the daylight but also at night. The Ukrainians launched a lot of attempts to attack the Russian positions in Klishchiivka. We got a lot of updates from the western part of this settlement, and some sources are saying that Ukrainians managed to enter and to force the Russians to step back inside of the Klishchiivka itself. But as I understand, probably Klishchiivka is already in the gray zone. Nobody controls this territory, and every single day the Ukrainians send their forces from the west, the Russians send their forces from the east, and there are very fierce fightings inside of the settlement for establishing control over the settlement for 100%. So I believe that the Russians are stepping back a little bit, but not like withdrawing from their positions, but just towards more reliable. And currently the situation in Klishchiivka reminds me the situation on Vremevka in side of the central Staromayorsk. The Russians withdrawn the northern positions, allowing the Ukrainians to enter, and after that the Russians are bombing and shelling the Ukrainians heavily, and the Ukrainians are forced to step back. So basically Klishchiivka for now is a small ambush, small trap for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians do have possibilities to enter, but not every single Ukrainian have possibility to leave this settlement because of very heavy damage that the Russians can deal to these forces. The Ukrainians published the video how they were bombing and shelling the Russian positions on the northern edge, on the northern front position of this settlement. Basically, this video confirms that the Russians still control the northern forest. The Ukrainians, the 5th Storm Brigade, were using drones to attack the Russians, but the Russians are still there. And we got a video of another destroyed Ukrainian Bradley on the west of Andreevka. A few days ago, these days, we got a lot of video from the Russian side of their tanks between this position and Andreevka. There were at least 2 Russian tanks that were damaged by the Ukrainian drones. Probably the Russians, because of very massive attack from FVP drones, were forced to step back, and the Ukrainians took a decision to use the situation, and basically the Ukrainians, while moving in this area, were destroyed by the Russian artillery. Also, we got video, just some photo that we got today in the open source of destroyed Ukrainian Tu-64 tank. Now we are moving to the northern flank of Solidar, and after a small operational pause that was made by the Ukrainians, 10th Mountain Assault Brigade, the Ukrainians continue publishing the video of attacking and hunting the Russian forces on this bridgehead. I'll repeat one more time, I don't understand this operation from the Russian side. The Russian infantry and forces were moved to this area, as I understand, without any protection from air defense. They don't have any protection, even the simplest protection against the drones that Ukrainians use to attack their positions. And the Ukrainians almost every single day publish more and more videos from this area, how they're hunting the Russians, and we haven't seen any video from the Russian side how they were trying to prevent, to shut down, or probably even to attack the Ukrainian positions in Vysyolia, their drone positions. Situation, according to my understanding, is critical for the Russians, and they yet haven't found any solution how to reduce the Ukrainian pressure and how to reduce the risk that comes from the Ukrainian side on this bridgehead. But yet the Russians control this territory, and as I understand, they're not planning to withdraw or to step back from these positions. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of fierce fightings on Donetsk front line, the Ukrainians lost 280 soldiers, 8 armored vehicles, and 4 artillery systems. The Russians managed to repel up to 14 attacks from the Ukrainian side. Also, the Russians continued their artillery duels in Siversk bridgehead, and as a result of one of those duels, the Russians destroyed the Ukrainian self-propelled artillery system in the vicinity inside of Siversk, between the railroad and the main road in that settlement. Now we are moving to Liman front line. We haven't received any updates. There were some updates about destroying commando squads, reconnaissance team, and so on, without any video confirmations. The only we got from the Russian side, how the Russians were attacking and bombing the Ukrainian positions in Kremenaya forest. We are using this video just as another geolocation that confirms that the defense line, that the combat line in this area goes along this small road, and this one more time confirms the positions either of Ukrainians and the Russian forces. The Ministry of Defense reported that as a result of fierce fightings on this area, the Ukrainians lost 170 soldiers, 12 armored vehicles, and 4 artillery systems. The Russians managed to repel 7 attacks. As you can see, the level of losses of Ukrainians is very heavy in comparison with the previous days. For example, yesterday the Ministry of Defense reported about 100 soldiers the losses. Today we're 170, so almost like 2 times the level of losses have been increased, and that means that Ukrainians launched a lot of counter-offensive operations, but they haven't managed to get any success, any results. All the attacks were repelled, and the Russians still control this territory, and they're continuing their regrouping before the Russians round of counter-offensive operation. Very interesting updates are continue coming from Karmazinovka bridgehead. As you can see, I have updated the map, and a lot of mappers have already updated the map the same way. Deep State map, many other mappers have start showing that this area, these 3 forests are under Russian control, and this is a very critical situation for the Ukrainians. They were not prepared for this offensive operation. The Russians continue developing their positions. They're building trenches, fortifications, strongholds in the forest. They're building pontoon bridges. They're building all necessary infrastructure. I believe they maybe need another week. And after that, we can see the greatest, very big offensive operation of the Russians in this area. And probably, as I understand, this is exactly the area where the Russians are planning or are going to start using the Russian cluster rounds massively. Because the Ukrainians, first of all, won't be prepared. Before the Russians attack, the Ukrainians will use this type of weapon from their side enough to give the Russians possibility to use the same level of the usage of these munitions. And if Ukrainians are not going to be prepared, of course they will lose a lot of manpower as a result of usage of this shell from the Russian side, and of course the Russians will be able to penetrate and to get very deep inside the Ukrainians' defense orders, and even to collapse the entire front line. And furthermore, the Russians will be able to encircle the entire Ukrainian forces in Liman front line, in Nevsky, Terny salient, and even in Kupyansk. So this could be a very, very big problem and the beginning of real collapse of Ukrainian army. And this collapse can come exactly from this area. Now we're moving to Novosilovska, and we got one video from the Ukrainian side how they were bombing the Russian positions inside of the Novosilovska in the railroad ways. That confirms the Russian control over this part of the settlement. So this is like the first video confirmation that we got from the Ukrainian side about the Russian control over these railroad ways. I'll remind you that months ago this territory was under Ukrainian control. And we are moving to the Kupyansk front line. We haven't received another day any confirmations, video confirmations about any attacks, any operation from the Russian side, just the text messages about significant results and so on. And the Ministry of Defense reported that as a result of offensive operation in this area, the Ukrainians lost 110 soldiers. And basically this is one of the heaviest losses of the Ukrainians on this front line since the beginning of the special military operation. I expect that these days we are going to start receiving some video and photo confirmations and probably some report of Ministry of Defense, because the level is very heavy and the level is almost the same as on Liman during the regular situation. So the Russians advancing in this area and continue pushing in direction of Kupyansk. More updates we start receiving from the Kharkiv front. For now we haven't received, the Ministry of Defense haven't recognized these 4 front line as the separate front line, Kharkiv front line, but almost every single day we continue receiving more and more videos from the Russian side, how they're trying to track and discover the Ukrainian positions, the Ukrainian ammo depots, command centers, equipment, radars, and the Russians are bombing and shelling and destroying almost every single day. 2 or 3 videos we receive from this front line. In particular, in this video we see how the Russians destroyed the Ukrainian radar. On this video we see how the Russians managed to track and discover the Ukrainians reconnaissance team that was moving along the border line. The Russians managed to discover them and to attack them using FVP drone. As a result of probably the Ukrainian soldiers were wounded as a result of that attack. And also we got another video how the Russians managed to discover and to destroy the Ukrainian hangar with armored vehicles. As you can see in this video, the Russians first managed to track the movements of armored vehicles, and after that they destroyed this warehouse, probably using the guided bombs. And I believe that's it for today. Another video, just one more time. The Russians published the video of destroyed Ukrainian ammo depot in Zhytomyr. So probably this was the response to the Ukrainian attack against the ammo depot in Crimea. So we see this war of attrition. Parties try to, before the next biggest offensive operation, both sides, either the Russians and the Ukrainians, are trying to destroy the munitions and ammo depot of each other, because they know that both sides, either the Russians and the Ukrainians, during the previous months were able to accumulate enough of shells, ammos, and so on the front line, on the territory of, let's say, DPR, LPR, and Zaporozhye. The Ukrainians the same. And before the next attack, they need to destroy as much as possible. And probably this is also going to be a key for winning. And as we can see, the Russians have already lost 2 ammo depots in Crimea, very powerful. And the Ukrainians have lost also a few of them, and one of them was destroyed in Zhytomyr. And now that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.